Hello and welcome to video 2, How to Write Performance Assessments. This is Brandy Muha, Director of Curriculum and Instruction for East Porter County School Corporation. This video is going to cover the steps it takes to write a performance-based assessment. So where am I going to go to find my information on performance assessments? You're going to be able to go to your curriculum design folder, which is where we house all of our curriculum information and work. Click on that folder and you're going to see a new folder in there called Performance Assessments. Within this folder, you are going to see the two documents you are going to need for writing your performance assessments, as well as the PowerPoints used in these videos. So I'm going to open up video 2, PowerPoint. And before we really begin getting into how to write performance assessments, we need to revisit what student learning objectives are. We know that teachers have many ways of measuring student learning throughout the year. They review standards, they account for students' starting points, they give assessments aligned to the standards, and measure how their students grow during the year. For teachers who administer a state assessment or district NWEA assessment, information on student growth is provided to us in the form of growth model data. For teachers of other subjects, they don't have that information available to them. The student learning objective is a long-term academic goal that Group 4 teachers set for groups of students. At East Porter County, we don't focus on growth for our SLOs. Rather, we focus on mastery of content. 80% is considered mastery of course content. So SLOs are long-term. They don't focus on just a small unit within a course. Rather, they focus on the main learnings or the big ideas that a teacher wants his or her students to learn over the course. And in our instance, over the course of a semester, so second semester. SLOs are informed by available data and they can be developed by a single teacher or they can be developed by a team of teachers. Having teachers create the SLO assessment allows those teachers to bring their knowledge and skills to the table. Teachers are empowered to use their experience and knowledge of students to identify key content and standards to be assessed. Our use of performance assessments as the focus for our SLOs makes sense because this will provide a critical link between instruction, standards, and assessment, especially with our focus on higher order thinking. So you are going to have a Google Doc that is going to be used to guide you through the steps of this process. As well as a document that you see here, the SLO assessment information document. And this document is going to be used to share with your principal and me. And this document is where you're going to give us the information about your SLO group. So as you write your own performance task, you are to work with those in your same assigned SLO group as shown in the memo that was sent out to you earlier. Even if you are a singleton working on your own, you are encouraged to talk with your peers to get their insight into the work you are doing as well. So let's take a look at the Google Doc called SLO Assessment Information. When you open it, you should be forced to copy the document before you begin working on it. If you do not see the copy document that pops up, go ahead and make sure you create a copy of the document. And again, if you are not in the PowerPoint and you want to access this document, you're going to go back into your Google Drive, Curriculum Design folder, Performance Assessments, and it is called SLO Assessment Information blank. So this is the first document you're going to be looking at when creating your performance assessment. So once you make a copy of the document, you are going to rename for your course, and it's going to be, I'm going to type up in here, it's going to be course name, SLO info, semester 2. So that's what now obviously you're not going to put course name, you're going to put the name of your course. And then you're going to look at the top of the document. It says SLO assessment information. Notice the only teachers who complete this document are those who are using the SLO assessment for their evaluation. All others will only be required to administer and score the performance assessment for their classroom use as their final. So this document, again, is the approval for your SLO group. So when you look at the top, you're going to see assessment author's name. You're going to type in your name, the content area and course. What grade level are you going to be using for your SLO group? And then I already put in the interval of instruction, which is second semester. So again, below that it says, please use the information below to submit to your building principal along with the SLO performance assessment that you will be creating. So the first thing you need to think about when filling out this document, you need to consider the baseline and trend data for your SLO group. So that's number one, baseline and trend data. So these forms of data can include pre-assessment results, but it doesn't have to. So you don't need to do a traditional pre-test, and we're not asking you to write a pre-test, but you do want to consider where your students are at when they're walking into your classroom. So the forms of data you could use could include pre-assessment results, data from previous years, so thinking about how classes in the past have performed, trend data from students over several years, progress monitoring results. You could have formative or summative assessment results, or any other evidence of student knowledge that informs you about your students' readiness to learn the content in your classroom. So again, your baseline data doesn't have to be a traditional pretest. That is why I'm using the term baseline data. As I just stated, it can come from historical knowledge of your course. It could be a survey you give your kids on the first day of class. It can be trends in student performance in your class throughout several years. You as the professional make the judgment as to how and what you are going to use to create a baseline of where your students are at in their readiness to learn for your course. In many cases, it may be helpful for you to think about 3 groups of students. Think about those who are prepared to access the course content, those who are not prepared, and those who are very well prepared. So again, I'm not going to tell you what to use as a baseline. That's your determination as a professional. You're not required to create a brand new pretest. This is just for your own use. But you need to be able to validate to your administrator how you are determining what will end up constituting highly effective and effective for you. So again, looking at number 1, baseline data, what information are you using to determine where your students are in their knowledge of course content? Are you using a pretest, survey, data trends from the past? So you're just going to type that in. So if you're using a survey, you're going to type survey. If you're using a pretest, you'll type pretest. If you are using data trends, put data trends. Next is the student population. And this is just for you to start thinking about your students in particular and who you're going to be working with for your SLO group. Now, your SLO group could be an entire class. It could be, if you're a high school teacher, maybe it's all of the kids that you teach in a particular class, or maybe it's just one period of students. Again, that's up to you. We're putting this ownership back on you, so you guys are having more say. We want you to be the professionals to help determine the SLOs. So you're going to type in the number of students you're going to be using for this SLO assessment, and obviously that could end up changing if someone moves or even moves in. You're going to write in if you have any identified high ability students, which you could find on Skyward. If you are not sure how to find that, you can ask me and I can help you with that. Students with IEPs 504s, just how many? So this is numbers of students. How many students are LEP students? And then students, maybe I didn't list a category for, and you want to identify them in your SLO group. So again, this is just for you, for your information. And then the box below is where you, after thinking about that baseline data that you used, so let's say you used a survey or you used a pre-test, you're going to take and put how many of those students do you feel are prepared to access your content? How many students do you feel are not prepared? And then how many are very well prepared? So there's 3 categories you're going to be placing those numbers of students in, that total number of students. So again, you're going to fill out the top information. You're going to tell us what are you going to use to create your baseline data. Give us numbers of students here. And then out of the total number of students, how many are ready, how many are not ready, and how many are well beyond ready. They could actually probably have some more advanced curriculum. So after that, after number 2, you're going to determine a focus. Now, basically, the focus for the performance task is what you decide that students should know and be able to do. For ELA, math, and social studies, you will be using the power standards that you will be teaching in your second semester. For all other courses, you are going to be looking at the standards outlined in your curriculum maps that you've been using for the past several years. Look at the standards in your current curriculum maps for second semester and determine which ones are the most important for your students to know. You can use the Power Standards folder in our shared curriculum design folder to assist you in choosing the most important standards for your course if you would like to do so, but that's not a requirement. If the power standards have been unwrapped, because that is happening for ELA, math, and social studies, some of them are unwrapped by now. If the power standards have been unwrapped, that can also assist you in the process. You can use those to help you create a performance task and even a scoring guide. So your assessment could be several tasks for your standards, or it may be one large task that encompasses all of your power standards. The beauty of this design is that it's completely up to you as to how you do that. So in number 3, with determining the focus, you are going to basically type in what are the standards that you expect students to master by the end of second semester. So in this box, you are going to type the standard number as well as the wording of the standard. Because we don't know all of the standards for every course, so that will help us. Um, so again, you're going to type in the box the number of the standard and the words that go with that standard. Now, when creating your performance assessments, you want to think about how many standards you are going to be addressing in your assessment. We don't want an assessment that is so long and cumbersome that we lose sight of what we really want our kids to know and learn and have mastery of. So we have some English, math, and social studies units that have more than 6 power standards. Um, be careful going over 6 power standards for the assessment. When you start getting into more than 6 standards that you're assessing as the most important critical content for that semester, you start losing a handle on exactly the skills that you're assessing, and you start branching out, and it becomes difficult to truly get to the higher level thinking that we want. So again, think about how many standards you are choosing. So if you have let's say 18 power standards for second semester, really think about out of those 18, what are the most important 6? And are with those important 6, are you able to determine as an educator that your kids are ready for their next level of learning based on these 6 power standards? So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind and think about. So this next piece is called Mastery Target. And this is where you will write in how many students passing with an 80% or higher will constitute a rating for you of highly effective, and so on. So previously, we had set that up for you at the district level. So you would get your mastery scores and we would say 80% of the students need to get 80% or higher. Well, we don't want to do that anymore. So that's why we're going back to looking at this baseline data. We want to know how many of your students you feel are prepared or not prepared or are advanced. And using that number, you're going to determine, and your evaluator will approve, what your performance of highly effective, improvement necessary, etc. would be by setting the number of students who must meet the mastery score on the assessment used in your SLO. So again, mastery is 80%. So in the box below, you're going to type in how many students will meet mastery for you to be rated highly effective. How many students would meet mastery for you to be rated effective? How many students would reach mastery of 80% for improvement necessary, and the same for ineffective? And this would be approved by your principal. So obviously, if you're starting with 3 students who are advanced and very well prepared, um, you're not going to end up with saying 3 students will meet 80% or more of mastery and I will be highly effective. You want to be logical about that. But again, this is back onto you as the professional and making that decision. So number 5 is the summary of student performance. This is where you're going to write, how did the students do? What are the results? And I'm going to actually take out this growth because we're not really focusing on growth at all. We're only talking about mastery. So number 5 cannot be completed until after the assessment is administered and scored. So you won't be doing anything with number 5 until the very end of the year. And then after you give us the data, so for example, I had 6 kids get 80% and 10 kids get 50%, however you want to write it in. Then you're going to mark. Well, based on what you put up here, what would you mark yourself? Were you effective, highly effective? And then we're also adding a text box in here where you get to say, hey, there's something I want you to think about here. So were there any changes to the number of students in your class, or were there significant issues that should be considered when scoring your performance? So let's say you make your mastery for highly effective is 10 out of 20 students will get 80% or better. All right, well, let's say only 9 get that, and so you're not considered highly effective. You might want in the box to let your principal know, though, you had 1 student who had really poor attendance during the school year, and you are going to have to determine whether or not that impacted the results of the assessment. So once you get number 5 done, again, you can't do this until the end of the school year, but this is what you would take to your principal. So really, for the very beginning of the school year, or semester, I apologize, you're going to fill in for the SLO assessment numbers 1 through 4. Once you fill in numbers 1 through 4, you're going to share this document with your building principal and me, okay? Now, every teacher who has an SLO will have to complete this document. So if there are 3 PE teachers, freshmen, who are writing the assessment together, all 3 of you will still need to have this document because your classes are different, your student makeup is different, and your student numbers are different. So this document is for you specifically. It's you as an independent teacher. So again, this is called the SLO Assessment Information Document. First thing you need to do. So again, when you go into your Drive, Curriculum Design, Performance Assessments, and you are going to look at SLO assessment information blank. Okay? Next, we are going to get into how to write a performance assessment. And before we do, I'm going to show you a video.
Hello. Welcome to Energy Conservation Incorporated.
Thank you. I really hope to get a job here.
Well, let's get started with your interview. What do you think are your greatest strengths?
My greatest strength.
Yes, your greatest strengths.
What are my answer choices?
What do you mean?
My answer choices. You know, A, B, C, or D.
There are not any answer choices.
Oh, I understand. In that case, I choose C.
You choose C?
Yes, I choose C. My 5th grade teacher told me to always choose C when I did not know the answer.
Oh, it sounds like your 5th grade teacher really prepared you for your future. Moving on then. This job will require you to write proposals about energy conservation. Are you a strong writer?
Yes. My teachers always told me that I write very good stories. I also like to write poetry.
Well, we will not need you to write poetry or stories. We will need you to write proposals regarding energy conservation.
Proposals. Is that like writing a persuasive essay?
Sure.
In that case, yes. I am very good at writing proposals. Every year in school, my teachers made me write a proposal regarding school uniform policies. I also wrote some proposals about banning cell phones in school. Would you like to read them?
No, I would not like to read them. If you get a job here, you will need to write proposals about energy conservation. Your proposals will need to include basic mathematical equations as well as scientific research.
Wait.
What is wrong?
I am confused.
That is not very surprising.
You said I would have to include mathematical equations and scientific research in my writing.
Yes, that is what I said.
But that doesn't make sense.
What doesn't make sense?
Math, science, and writing. They are separate subjects. I don't know if I can incorporate math and science into my writing. They are all very different.
Well, if you work here, that is what you will have to do.
This job seems very difficult. I do not think my public education prepared me to work here.
Well, I have to agree with you. I have one more question for you though. Why did you think you were ever qualified to work here in the first place? Why are you looking around?
You asked me a question, and I do not know the answer. So, I am looking for someone to think pair share with.
There is no one for you to think pair share with.
Oh. In that case, I choose C.
I think I've heard enough. Thank you for coming in.
Okay, so that video is obviously meant to show an extreme. Although it is titled Why We Need Common Core, I don't think it's about the standards at all. I believe it is about how we tie any standard to what we expect our kids to know and be able to do. Bottom line, students need to know how what we teach relates to the real world, how they can use what they are learning to solve today's problems. Do current final exams in your classes do this? Maybe, maybe not. But performance assessments give students an opportunity to demonstrate and apply their learning. This next slide shows two cartoons, and I want you to just think about, as you look at these cartoons, how do they illustrate the current problem in education? And think about that. I'm not even going to discuss it. I just want you to think about that. Performance-based assessments create opportunities for students to apply problem-solving skills. The performance-based assessment is also about the application of learning in new situations, not recalling or repeating information in an assessment task. There are many misconceptions about how to design good performance assessments and how to use them in the classroom. Hopefully this video will clear up some of those misconceptions. It is through higher order performance assessments that we will be able to discover what students understand and can do with the knowledge they possess. While it is important to continue to have fixed response quizzes and tests in your courses, performance assessments are going to add another layer, an important layer to our assessment system for the classrooms. So I want to clarify some terminology. There's often talk of performance assessment for performance-based learning, authentic assessment, alternative assessment, culminating performances. Each of these terms have a specific meaning, but they are all related. Basically, each of these assessments makes a direct connection between student learning and assessment. At the foundation of all of these terms is the idea that students learn best when they are actively engaged in gaining knowledge and are required to show evidence that they have learned. For our purposes, when talking about performance assessments, we are talking about an assessment which asks students both what they know and how they can apply the knowledge. Usually this is done by performing or producing something. Advocates of performance assessment call for assessments of the following kind: designing and carrying out experiments, writing essays which require students to rethink, to integrate, or to apply information, working with other students to accomplish tasks, demonstrating proficiency in using a piece of equipment or a technique, building models, developing, interpreting, and using maps, making collections, writing term papers, critiques, poems, short stories, giving speeches, playing musical instruments, participating in oral exams, developing portfolios, developing athletic skills or routines. The list could go on and on. The performance assessment can be made up of one or more performance tasks. So performance tasks are complex in nature. They may take several days for students to complete. They require students to use several skills or strategies. The primary trait of a performance task is that students must develop a real product or complete a demonstration of their learning. Performance tasks are based on a significant issue or question and require the student to do some investigation and work. So performance assessment provides teachers with a deeper understanding of what students know and should be done to further their learning. It also provides teachers with a method of evaluation that is more interesting and relevant to students. It provides teachers with a method of both discovering what students know and observing how they can apply the knowledge. It also gives students a more engaging and active way of learning, and also more information for the student about what they are expected to know and to be able to do, rather than fixed response test. So I want you to watch this real quick video on this young lady doing a sample oral presentation.
Hi, my name is Chris Stagel, and I did my project on tall buildings, and it's about finding the best structural design when it comes to earthquakes. So what I did when doing this project is that I had to construct a springboard, and that's this right here, and I did this by the help of my neighbor, Scott Henry, and that's him up there in the picture. He's a carpenter, and he was a big help. When doing this experiment, I had the help of my science teacher, Mr. West, and that's him in the picture. He was my supervisor while I was in my school's physics lab while I was using my school's technology. How I did this experiment was that I had two motion sensors hooked up to my towers. I had one hooked up to the front side of the building, measuring the front to back motion, and one hooked up to the side of the building, measuring the side to side motion. I did this experiment with the help of my father, Lawrence Daigle, because the forces were too strong for me to hold and I needed a steady hand. So how we did the experiment was that you pull back on the force meter and wait till the motion was out of the building, and then you'd click start on the computers and then let it go. And then all these different types of graphs would come up on the computer. I used 4 different forces, and for each force I did 3 different trials. And that was because the motion sensors are really sensitive and can even pick up dust particles. So for each graph, I got the average maximum and minimum, and I subtracted the two and got the difference, and the difference was its actual displacement. Overall, Tower 2 did the best, and that's this structure here, and that was because it had more flexibility than the other 2 towers. So when the force was applied, the building was flexible enough to absorb that shock wave and the aftershocks.
Okay, so after watching that video, you could stop and think to yourself, what are some knowledge and skills and dispositions that student demonstrated through her performance assessment? Think about everything that was needed in order for her to demonstrate an understanding of content standards. Was that a great example? Probably not, but you could also use that same presentation to think what skills she needs to improve upon. But that is an example of a performance assessment or a product and a demonstration of a performance assessment. So when a standard requires students to carry out some activity, for example, play a clarinet, prepare a slide for viewing, dribble a basketball, performance assessment tasks that ask students to demonstrate skills or processes are useful. When a standard requires students to use knowledge and skills they have acquired to create some sort of product, a bookcase, a model of a plant cell, an original short story, an essay on Shakespeare's treatment of gender roles in his sonnets, a report on the use of performance-enhancing drugs in professional sports. Performance assessment tasks that ask students to create a product are useful. So whether it is demonstrating skills or processes or creating a product, we want to ensure ultimately we are assessing higher order thinking skills. For example, dribbling a basketball in a drill reflects psychomotor skills, but dribbling a basketball flexibly, moving slower and faster with bigger and smaller steps in a game to avoid opponents' moves and block and to get past the opponents and into a position to score requires higher order thinking. So there are 3 steps in designing a performance task, and while readily straightforward, the truth is quality performance tasks can be difficult to develop. While a well-designed task will not guarantee that students will successfully reach all of the goals the teacher has established, a poorly designed task creates a certainty of failure for students and teachers. This is a suggested 3-step process that I'm providing to you. This is not the only process you may find useful. There are several different ways of writing performance assessments. This is just one way. You are encouraged to work through the process outlined in the video and make adaptations as needed. So for step 1, you are going to first think and look at your standards. You're going to list the skills, knowledge, and thinking you want your students to demonstrate at the end of the year. So you're going to take a look at those standards you wrote on your first document, and you're going to ask yourself, what are the skills, the knowledge, and the thinking I want my students to demonstrate? As each task is designed, you need to begin by identifying the types of knowledge, skills, and thinking students are expected to demonstrate mastery of. They should be of high value, and in order to be truly authentic, they should be similar to those which are faced by adults in their daily lives and work. You can ask these 5 questions to help you identify what you want to be demonstrated through the performance task. And again, these are just suggestions. You don't have to go through all of these, but it just helps you wrap your mind around what is it I want my students to be able to do or demonstrate. So these are 5 questions listed here. What important cognitive skills or attributes do I want them to develop? What social and affective skills do I want them to develop? What metacognitive skills do I want them to develop? What types of problems do I want them to be able to solve? What concepts and principles do I want my student to be able to apply? So again, you can use these questions to help you in determining ultimately what do you want them to demonstrate to you. So after you list what you want students to be able to demonstrate for you, you are going to begin to actually design a performance task. So a performance task is something that requires students to demonstrate the skills and knowledge you just wrote down. And you want it to motivate students. They should be challenging yet achievable. So you have to think they need to be designed so students are able to complete them successfully independent of you. The task usually includes a focused question or a problem or some kind of background scenario. The focus should center around a significant question or an important problem that students will want to find an answer or a solution to. The scenario should draw students into the task. It's the hook that engages students. So I'm going to show you an example of a performance task from Smarter Balanced Assessments. I'm going to go down here. This is grade 11 math. And their task is New York State wants to change its system for assigning speeding fines to drivers. The current system allows a judge to assign a fine that is within the ranges shown in Table 1. Some people have complained that the New York speeding fine system is not fair. The New Drivers Association is recommending a new speeding fine system. The NDA is studying the Massachusetts system because of claims that it is fairer than the New York system. In this task, you will analyze the speeding fine systems for both New York and Massachusetts, use data to propose a fairer speeding fine system for New York State. So this is their task. This is the hook. This is going to draw students in. So rather than just having them read a table and apply the knowledge, it's giving them a problem that they need to find a solution for. Also, when you're designing your task, you want to find a question or issue that is going to really not only hook the students in, but you want to think of some guidelines that are going to help in making your decision about what to ask students or what you want them to investigate. So the first thing is you want students to be able to have an opportunity for exploration. Answering the question or solving the issue should require students to look at various options. In other words, tasks should be open-ended. The other thing to consider is answering the question or investigating the issue should be a complex job for students. It should require them to search, analyze, synthesize information. You want it to be about the higher order thinking, DOK levels 3 and 4. A good performance task will require students to engage in a quest. Students should also believe that the question or issue is worth studying. They should be interested in finding the answer or solution. Possible solutions to the task should be based in reality and not simply on opinion. It should be feasible for students to answer the question or investigate the issue. A task which appears to be very good may be disastrous if students are frustrated in developing a product because of limited resources or some other factors. So you need to be cognizant of that as well. We're going to look at another example of a performance task. This is world history, and this is actually from the state of Georgia. So here's a sample for performance task. You are a museum curator who is creating an exhibit about World War II. You will create a triboard display, poster, or PowerPoint that displays the road to defeat of one of the Axis powers of World War II. This display will include the following, and you see the bullet points. So that's another example of a performance task. The chart on this slide shows examples of questions and issues which might be used in developing a context for a performance task. They are arranged by discipline, but it should be noted that many of them could be considered interdisciplinary questions or issues. The question, problem, or scenario for the performance task can be as simple or as involved as you want to make it. In some cases, there may be very little need for detailed background information. Sometimes students may need the background to be more elaborate. Many teachers enjoy writing scenarios because it gives them an opportunity to be creative. Let's look at another performance assessment example. This one is for science. This is the coat caper for grades 9 through 12. And this is Kentucky. So this is the task with student directions. You can also look at how they laid out their performance assessment in terms of student name, school name, the grade. You have general instructions, okay? There's a group activity. Suppose an old coat has just been donated to Boonesboro State Park by one of Daniel Boone's descendants. Park officials must determine whether the coat could be authentic before putting it on display. Your group will act as a team of forensic specialists. You will examine pollen and fibers taken from the garment, make an analysis, and advise the park officials concerning the coat's authenticity. So that's their task. That's the hook. That's what's going to grab the students in. That would get me excited because it becomes relevant. There's a true purpose. I'm not answering it just so I can get a grade on a final exam. I'm truly answering it to solve a problem as well as demonstrate what I've learned, demonstrate my understanding. So after you set up the problem and the scenario, you need to write directions. So the most important thing to remember about writing directions for the performance task is to make sure that they are clear to the students. That may seem obvious, but it is easy to write the directions for a task and think they are very clear. Sometimes, however, what is clear to you as an author may not be clear to others. The best way to ensure clarity of directions is to let several people read them before you turn in your proposed performance assessment. Having other teachers or even students who aren't in your class or former students read the directions could be helpful in giving you feedback about clarity. Directions for the task should explain what students are expected to do and what the final product or performance will be. Performance tasks should include a tangible product or performance which will be evaluated. This is the defining characteristic of a performance assessment task. So here's another example. Your task is you have a brand new pencil. Design a mathematical model to determine how much material is lost after sharpening the pencil. Very simple, straightforward task. The directions, be sure to label the diagrams to illustrate your procedure and include the units of measurement. So again, the directions don't need to be cumbersome. They just need to be clear and easy to understand. So let's look at another example of a performance assessment. So this is social studies, grade 9 through 10. And I'm going to scroll down here a little bit. So the performance task, it sets it up for what they've done. And it says, who changes the world? During the civil rights movement, did individuals and or groups bring about change? Anthropologist Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. In a formal essay, and then it lists the directions and bullet points. So you have the task and you have the directions. The directions for the task do need to include specific instructions to students explaining what they are expected to do through their product or presentations. A few possibilities are listed below. So you could ask students to persuade an audience, perform an experiment, interpret an event, compare and contrast, investigate an issue, make a decision on something. Also, you want to think about the amount of detail needed in your directions. When you're outlining exactly how students are supposed to complete the task, it depends on several factors how much detail you need. If students have very little experience in doing performance tasks, you may need to provide fairly explicit instructions about how to do the task. Another idea is to begin collecting examples of high quality student work who complete the task each year. So at the end of this year, you might want to collect the best of the best. And those can be used as exemplary models, and you can challenge students to produce even better products or performances. As students take on more responsibility for their learning, they should require fewer details about how to do a performance task. A model or example which illustrates your expectations will always help students understand the task, no matter what their level. All performance tasks have tangible product or performance which students must complete. This is the what aspect of the task. So it's very important that students understand the expectations. Some possible products you see listed here. It could be, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back up to products. I apologize. Some possible products you see, models, editorials, lab reports, storyboards, song lyrics, advertisements. You can see a list there. The next slide shows some possible performance tasks. Having plays or video presentations, having a debate, oral defense of work, audio presentations, public readings of original work. When developing your task, keep in mind the following questions. How much time will it take students to complete the performance assessment? Is this going to be accomplished in a traditional final setting? Do you want them to have 2 weeks to complete? You will need to determine the setting and time for your performance assessment. There are no rules regarding the appropriate length or complexity of a task. However, there are problems associated with developing overly complex and creative performance tasks. Keep your student audience in mind. How does the desired skill or accomplishment relate to other complex cognitive, social, and affective skills? Priority should be given to those which apply to a variety of situations. Keep in mind, performance assessments are not a new concept. Teachers have always assigned tasks which require their students to perform and develop products. Develop tasks that are fair and free of bias. Tasks should not give particular advantage to certain students. Make them interesting, challenging, achievable. Make it clear. Give step-by-step directions, and make sure the responsibility is placed mostly on the students. Your performance assessment, once you create it, it's going to be shared with your building principal and myself, and it is due by April 1st. The third step in creating an assessment is the scoring guide. And we're not going to cover that in this video. That's going to be in a third video. So a performance task without the scoring that maps the student's performance back to the knowledge and skills you intended to assess, it's not a performance assessment, it's just an activity. So we'll be talking about that in the third video. And I'm going to go back into our drive real quick. And again, in the performance assessment folder, the second document I want you to look at will be writing the SLO performance assessment. This document, the writing the SLO performance assessment, is a summary of the information I just presented to you in the video and PowerPoint. So you're going to be able to see step by step what you should do. I also have an FAQ. So if you have some questions, you can look here to see if they are answered within this document. And I also have some links to more examples of performance assessments. And I also said you can Google performance assessment examples. There are hundreds and hundreds of examples that are already ready for you. But this is the conclusion of our video, and I want you to know I do appreciate all the work you are doing for this. I think this is a move in a great direction for our students in terms of getting them to have higher order levels of thinking and applying their knowledge. So I'm very excited to see what you create. But I thank you all. And if you have any questions during this process, give me a call, talk to your building principal, talk to your friends, and we will all figure this out together. Thank you so much.